The champagne cork hit the marble floor of the Willowbrook Country Club with a sharp crack that made everyone turn. I stood there, 60 years old, sweating through my best navy suit, holding a glass that trembled just enough to catch the light from the crystal chandeliers above. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying across the room filled with colleagues, neighbors, and what I thought were friends. 42 years at Morrison and Associates. 42 years of spreadsheets, board meetings, and enough coffee to fill Lake Michigan. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. My wife Linda stood near the bar, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing that emerald dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. She was smiling, but something felt wrong. Her smile was too sharp, too practiced. They say retirement is when you stop living at work and start working at living, I continued, raising my glass. So here's to... Actually, David. Linda's voice cut through mine like a blade through silk. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble. Before we toast anything, I have something for you. The room fell silent. Even the servers stopped moving. Linda reached into her designer purse and pulled out a manila envelope thick with papers. My stomach dropped. "Divorce papers," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I won't support a jobless old man." The silence was deafening. Then, like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion, I heard clapping. My own children, Bryce, 28, and Nicole, 25, were applauding their mother. Their faces showed no surprise, no shock. This was rehearsed. "Dad, it's for the best," Nicole said, her voice carrying that practiced tone she used in her Instagram videos. "Mom deserves better than supporting someone with no future." Bryce nodded, adjusting his designer glasses. "We talked about it. This is the right move." Every eye in the room was on me. Camera phones appeared like vultures circling carrion. The fountain pen Linda handed me felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The paper beneath it was thick, expensive, the kind lawyers use when they want to make a statement. I could have fought, could have screamed, caused a scene, demanded explanations. Instead, I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I laughed. "Well," I said, signing my name with deliberate strokes, "I guess the canapés came with a side of legal papers tonight." I signed every page without reading them. 42 years of marriage, dissolved with ink on paper while my former colleagues watched like it was dinner theater. When I finished, I handed the pen back to Linda. "There," I said. "All yours." Linda's smile widened. She thought she'd won. They all did. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A wire transfer confirmation tone, a sound I'd programmed specifically for large deposits. $50 million had just hit my account. My severance package, sealed by a non-disclosure agreement that Linda had never bothered to ask about. I looked around the room one last time, at Linda, smugly triumphant, at my children, already planning how to spend what they thought was their inheritance, at my colleagues, some embarrassed, others entertained by the spectacle. "Enjoy the party," I said, setting down my untouched champagne. "I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting." The house felt different when I walked through the door that night. 42 years of shared space suddenly felt like enemy territory. Linda had gone to her sister's place, probably celebrating. The kids had vanished to whatever trendy bar they frequented, no doubt posting about their brave mother on social media. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my leather chair, the one Linda had always hated, because it didn't match her aesthetic. The silence was broken only by the grandfather clock in the hallway, counting down the seconds of my new life. That's when I noticed Linda's planner on the coffee table. She'd left it behind in her rush to celebrate. Curious, I flipped it open. Monthly appointments with Richard Ritchie Morrison, no relation to my former company, despite the name, her financial advisor. But these weren't recent appointments. They went back 3 years, every month, like clockwork, sometimes twice a month. I turned to my laptop and did what any suspicious husband should have done years ago. A simple search revealed Richard Morrison, CFP, age 43, divorced, owner of a new Maserati, and a taste for expensive suits that his client base shouldn't have been able to support. But the real revelation came when I found Linda's email account. She'd never been good with passwords, still used our anniversary date for everything. What I found made my blood run cold. Email after email between Linda and Richie, going back 3 years. Not just financial planning, personal messages, intimate messages. Plans for after the divorce. References to my pathetic pension and how they'd finally be free to live properly. But the worst part was a message from just 2 weeks ago. Talked to Sharon at Morrison and Associates. She confirmed David's pension will be about $2,800 a month. Perfect timing for the retirement party surprise. Sharon Walsh, my former HR director, Linda's old sorority sister from Northwestern. She'd fed Linda false information about my retirement package. I leaned back in my chair, processing the scope of their planning. 3 years. 3 years of meetings, planning, coordinating. They'd turned my retirement party into a public execution, assuming I'd walk away with pocket change. The bourbon tasted better with each sip. My phone rang. Grady Mitchell, my old friend from college who'd become a private investigator after his police career ended. "Dave, I saw the video," he said without preamble. "Half of Chicago's seen it by now. You okay?" "Better than okay," I said. "Grady, I need a favor. How quickly can you dig up information on someone?" "Depends on what you need and how deep you want me to go." "Richard Morrison, financial advisor. I want to know everything. His finances, his clients, his gambling habits if he has them. Everything." "This about your wife?" "Ex-wife," I corrected. "And yes, how much do you charge for a comprehensive background check?" "For you? Nothing. I'll have something by tomorrow night." After hanging up, I walked to my basement workshop. Linda had always called it my man cave, like it was some pathetic retreat. But down here, surrounded by my tools and woodworking projects, I could think clearly. On my workbench sat a bottle of brake fluid I'd bought months ago for my car. Nasty stuff. Ate through paint like acid. I picked it up, reading the warning labels, then set it back down. Not yet. I had bigger plans. Grady's report arrived the next evening via encrypted email. Richard Morrison wasn't just Linda's lover. He was a walking financial disaster. Gambling debts to 3 different casinos. A mortgage on his condo that was underwater by 40%. Credit cards maxed out. His Maserati? Leased, and he was 2 payments behind. The man Linda thought was her ticket to a better life was drowning in debt. But the real gold mine was in the attachments. Grady had somehow obtained Richie's phone records. Text messages between him and Linda, but also between him and other women. Linda wasn't his only married client receiving special attention. There were at least 4 others. I printed everything. 300 pages of evidence that painted a picture of a man who seduced married women, convinced them to divorce their husbands, then helped himself to their assets through investment opportunities that existed only on paper. The next morning, I drove to Richie's office building downtown. Glass and steel, all modern lines and expensive views. His office was on the 32nd floor, with a view of the lake that probably cost him more per month than most people made in a year. I didn't go up. Instead, I waited in the parking garage. At 11:30 a.m., Richie emerged from the elevator, talking loudly on his phone. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. "Trust me, it's like fleece season," he was saying. "These old guys, they get comfortable, stop paying attention. The wives do all the work for us. By the time they figure out what happened, we're already spending their money." He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Linda's husband was perfect. 42 years of marriage, never questioned a single statement. Now she's got half of everything, and I've got her eating out of my hand. 2 more months, maybe 3, and I'll have convinced her to put everything into my offshore fund. Then it's goodbye Chicago, hello Cayman Islands. He hung up and got into his Maserati. The engine roared to life, and he sped toward the exit ramp. I waited 10 minutes, then walked to where his car had been parked. A small puddle of brake fluid marked the spot where I'd punctured his brake line reservoir with an ice pick. Not enough to cause an accident, I wasn't a murderer, but enough to ruin his day and his expensive paint job when the fluid leaked onto his hood. That evening, I got a call from my lawyer, James Sternberg. David, we need to talk. Linda's attorney filed an emergency motion to freeze your assets. They're claiming you hid the severance package from her. Can they do that? They can try, but you signed the divorce papers before the package was announced publicly. The prenuptial agreement you signed 5 years ago specifically excludes all post-employment compensation from marital assets. She's not entitled to a penny of it. I remembered that prenup amendment. Linda had pressured me to sign it, claiming it was to protect both of us if either of our careers took off. I'd actually read it, unlike Linda, who'd signed without looking. What happens next? We go to court tomorrow. Bring copies of everything, the original prenup, the divorce papers she insisted on, the timeline of events. This should be straightforward. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Linda sat with her lawyer, Marcus McCallum, a man who looked like he charged by the syllable. She kept glancing at me, her expression cycling between anger and confusion. Judge Patricia Hawkins reviewed the documents with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen every divorce trick in the book. Mrs. Patterson, she said, using Linda's maiden name, which she'd apparently reverted to already, you filed for divorce and demanded immediate settlement. You signed these papers voluntarily, correct? Yes, but... And you were aware that Mr. David Thompson was retiring from his position? Yes, but I didn't know about the severance package. Did you ask about the severance package? Linda's lawyer whispered something to her. She straightened. He deliberately hid it from me. Judge Hawkins turned to me. Mr. Thompson, were you under any legal obligation to disclose the terms of your severance to your wife? No, Your Honor. The package was confidential until the public announcement. My wife had access to all our financial accounts and statements. She chose not to review them. And the prenuptial agreement clearly states that post-employment compensation is excluded from marital assets? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Hawkins set down the papers. Motion denied. The settlement stands as agreed upon by both parties. Mrs. Patterson, you cannot seek to modify an agreement simply because it proved less advantageous than you hoped. Linda's face went white. As we left the courtroom, she grabbed my arm. David, we can work this out. 42 years of marriage has to count for something. I looked at her hand on my arm, then into her eyes. It did count for something, Linda. It counted for exactly what you said it was worth when you served me those papers. I pulled free and walked away. The next week brought revelations that made my divorce look like a minor inconvenience. Grady had been busy, and what he'd uncovered about my own children made my stomach turn. You need to see this, he said, handing me a tablet in my kitchen. I got into their group chat. You're not going to like it. The messages went back months. Bryce, Nicole, and Linda planning my public humiliation with the precision of a military operation. Nicole, March 15th. Dad's retirement party is perfect timing. Mom serves papers, we show support, done deal. Bryce, March 15th. What about his feelings? This is pretty brutal. Linda, March 15th. He'll get over it. Men his age bounce back or they don't. Either way, we get the house and the savings. Nicole, March 16th. Trust fund kicks in when they're officially divorced, right? Linda, March 16th. That's the plan. Sharon at his company says pension is barely $3,000 a month. We're doing him a favor. Bryce, March 18th. Should we warn him it's coming? Linda, March 18th. Absolutely not. The shock value is important. Makes it harder for him to think clearly. I scrolled through weeks of messages. My own children, discussing me like I was a problem to be solved rather than their father. They'd planned every detail from Linda's dress to the exact moment she'd serve the papers, but the messages from after the party were even worse. Nicole, night of the party. Did you see Dad's face? I almost felt bad. Bryce, same night. He took it better than expected. Weird how calm he was. Linda, same night. Doesn't matter, it's done. Richie's opening champagne as we speak. Nicole, next day. Wait, what's this about a $50 million severance? Linda, next day. Fake news, Sharon would have told me. Bryce, next day. It's on the company website, holy shit. Linda, next day. We can contest the divorce, claim he hid assets. Nicole, next day. Can we still get our share? That last message was timestamped just 2 hours ago. My phone rang. Nicole. Dad, we need to talk. Do we? Look, I know things got heated at your party, but we're still family. Mom's really struggling with this whole thing. Is she? The thing is, Dad, Bryce and I have been thinking, we should get our fair share of your severance. I mean, we're your kids. I let the silence stretch until she spoke again. Dad? Are you there? I'm here. Tell me, Nicole, what exactly do you think your fair share should be? Well, a third each seems fair. You, me, and Bryce. Mom's already got the house. Interesting math. What about the college tuition I paid for both of you? What about it? The tuition that came from accounts your mother was supposed to fund from her salary, but instead diverted to her personal spending? Silence. Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. $43,000 for your Northwestern education, Nicole. $68,000 for Bryce's MBA. Money that was supposed to come from your mother's teacher pension fund, but came from my salary instead because she'd spent her education savings on jewelry and spa treatments. That's not... I have the receipts, Nicole. Bank statements going back 6 years. Your mother stole your college funds and let me pay twice. I hung up. Within an hour, my doorbell was ringing. Linda stood on my porch, her face red with anger. You can't turn our children against me, she said, pushing past me into the house. I didn't turn them against you, Linda. I just showed them who you really are. Those bank statements are private. Not anymore. Funny thing about divorce proceedings, they make everything public record. She spun around, her eyes wild. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won? I think I've learned something valuable about the people I thought I knew. Richie says we can still fight this. There are ways to... Richie's broke, Linda. She froze. What? Richard Morrison owes money to half the casinos in the state. His condo's in foreclosure. That Maserati? Repo man's looking for it. Your boyfriend isn't a successful financial advisor. He's a con man who seduces married women and steals their money. You're lying. I walked to my desk and pulled out Grady's report. 300 pages of documentation, bank records, court filings, police reports. He's done this to at least 4 other women in the past 5 years. Linda's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. Her face went from red to white to green. This can't be true. Call him, I said. Ask him about the gambling debts. Ask him about the other women. Ask him about his plan to take your money to the Cayman Islands. She stared at me. How do you know about that? Because I heard him bragging about it in a parking garage. Linda sank into my leather chair, the one she'd always hated, and put her face in her hands. What am I going to do? That's not my problem anymore, Linda. You made that very clear at my retirement party. 2 days later, I was having coffee at the Starbucks near Richie's office when I saw him stumble out of the building, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. The brake fluid had done its work. His Maserati's paint job was ruined, and apparently, so was his day. He was on his phone, arguing with someone. I told you, the money's coming. Linda just needs more time to liquidate her assets. He listened for a moment, then exploded. What do you mean she froze her accounts? She can't do that. More listening. Look, I've got other clients. Give me 2 weeks, maybe 3. I'll get you your money. He hung up and immediately dialed another number. Linda, baby, we need to talk. Something's come up with your ex-husband. He's been spreading lies about me, and now you're having second thoughts? That's not like you? I couldn't hear her response, but his face told the story. What do you mean, it's over? Linda, listen to me. We had a plan. You can't just... He pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at it like it had bitten him. She'd hung up. I finished my coffee and followed him to the parking garage. He was standing next to his ruined Maserati, kicking the tires and cursing. Car trouble? I asked. He spun around. David Thompson, I should have known. Should have known what? That you'd try to poison Linda against me. She told me what you said. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You think you're so smart, don't you? Sitting on your 50 million, acting like you're better than everyone else. I think I'm smarter than a man who brags about his crimes in public parking garages. His face went pale. You were listening? Fleece season, I believe you called it. Very poetic. Richie stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. You ruined everything. Linda and I had something special. You had a Mark and a Con. There's a difference. I loved her. I laughed. You loved her money, or what you thought was her money. She deserved better than you. Maybe. But she definitely deserved better than you. Richie's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing at me. Instead, he turned back to his car. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. I walked away, leaving him standing next to his ruined car in an empty parking garage, the sound of his curses echoing off the concrete walls. But Richie was wrong about one thing. It wasn't over. Not yet. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. Your kids planned this. Thought you should know. Meet me at Millennium Park tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. I showed up at the designated spot, a bench near the bean sculpture. The park was busy with tourists and locals enjoying the spring weather. A woman approached me, mid-50s, well-dressed but nervous. Mr. Thompson, I'm Angela Morrison, Richie's ex-wife. I stood to shake her hand. How did you get my number? I have my ways. I've been watching Richie for months, documenting his activities for my lawyer. He owes me $40,000 in back alimony. What did you want to tell me about my kids? She sat down, pulling out her phone. Richie recorded some of his conversations with Linda. Insurance, he called it, in case she tried to back out of their arrangement. She played a recording. Linda's voice, clear as day. The kids are completely on board. Nicole thinks it's hilarious that we're doing it at his retirement party. Bryce was worried about the optics, but I convinced him it's for the best. What about afterward? Richie's voice. They'll get their trust funds when the divorce is final. That was always part of the deal. They support me publicly. They get rewarded financially. And if your husband fights back? He won't. David's too dignified to cause a scene. That's always been his weakness. Angela stopped the recording. There's more. Hours of it. Your wife and Richie planning every detail, including how to manipulate your children into supporting her. Why are you telling me this? Because Richie destroyed my life, and I want him to pay. But also because what they did to you was wrong. No one deserves to be humiliated like that. She handed me a USB drive. Everything's on here. Do with it what you want. That night, I listened to every recording. Linda and Richie discussing my pathetic retirement prospects. Linda coaching Nicole on what to say to me. Bryce expressing doubts, then being talked into it by promises of money. But the worst recording was Linda talking to her sister. 42 years of marriage, and he never saw it coming. That's what happens when you get comfortable. David always thought he was the smart one in the relationship. Tomorrow night, he'll find out how wrong he was. I sat in my basement workshop until dawn, listening to my wife, my ex-wife, describe destroying me like it was a business transaction. The bottle of brake fluid sat on my workbench, but my plans had evolved beyond petty vandalism. I had something much better in mind. The Willowbrook Community Center was packed for the annual charity auction. The same crowd from my retirement party, plus dozens of others from our social circle. Linda was there, sitting with her sister, trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy despite her crumbling world. Richie was notably absent. Word around town was that his office had been raided by the SEC, and he'd disappeared sometime in the night. I'd made sure of that by sending Angela's recordings to the proper authorities. But tonight wasn't about Richie. Tonight was about closure. I waited until the auction was nearly over, then approached the microphone. The auctioneer, recognizing me, handed it over with a smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying across the packed room. "Some of you were at my retirement party 2 weeks ago. You witnessed what my family called perfect timing." The room fell silent. Linda's face went white. "I'd like to share some additional timing with you tonight." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system. "This is a recording made by Richard Morrison, the financial advisor who's been helping several women in our community with their investments." Linda's voice filled the room. "The kids are completely on board. Nicole thinks it's hilarious that we're doing it at his retirement party." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Nicole, sitting near the back, stood up and rushed toward the exit, but the crowd blocked her path. I played more clips, Linda discussing my pathetic prospects, Richie bragging about fleece season, my own children talking about me like I was a problem to be solved. "For 42 years," I said into the microphone, "I thought I knew my family. I thought loyalty meant something. I thought love was more than a business transaction." Linda stood up, her face red with humiliation and anger. "David, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I? Because it seems to me that ships sailed 2 weeks ago." I pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers. "These are foreclosure notices for 1247 Maple Street, the house Linda received in our divorce settlement. Turns out, she took out a second mortgage 3 years ago to fund her lifestyle and her affair. The bank's taking possession next Friday." Linda's sister grabbed her arm as she swayed on her feet. "But that's not the best part," I continued. "The best part is that Richard Morrison, the man she left me for, has been arrested by the FBI for securities fraud. He stole money from at least 12 women, including Linda." The crowd was completely silent now, everyone staring at Linda, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. My children, Bryce and Nicole, demanded their fair share of my severance package, so I've decided to give them exactly what they deserve. I pulled out 2 more envelopes. These are invoices for college tuition, living expenses, car payments, insurance, and various other costs I covered over the past 6 years. Money that was supposed to come from their mother's education fund, but came from my pocket instead because she'd spent their college money on jewelry and spa treatments. Bryce tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "The total comes to $247,000. Since they want their fair share of my money, they can start by paying back what they already owe me." I set the microphone back in its stand and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone staring at Linda, who was now crying openly. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. "They say the best revenge is living well," I called out, my voice carrying across the silent room. "I say it's living out loud." I walked into the parking lot, got in my car, and drove away, leaving behind 42 years of marriage and a family that had never really been mine. The next morning, I woke up in my empty house and made coffee in the kitchen that was finally, completely mine. My phone had 37 missed calls and twice as many text messages, but I deleted them all without reading them. Instead, I called my travel agent. "I'd like to book a trip," I said. "Somewhere warm, with good fishing and no extradition treaties." She laughed. "Planning to disappear?" "Already have." 3 days later, I was sitting on a beach in Costa Rica, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. My phone buzzed with another text from Linda, but I didn't read it. Instead, I turned the phone off and buried it in the sand. Somewhere back in Chicago, my ex-wife was discovering what it felt like to lose everything. My children were learning that actions have consequences, and Richard Morrison was probably sharing a cell with someone who appreciated his financial advice even less than I had. As for me, I was finally free. The waves crashed against the shore, washing away the sand and everything buried in it. Tomorrow, I'd buy a new phone with a new number, maybe learn Spanish, definitely learn to surf. For the first time in 42 years, the future was entirely my own.